Throughout his ministry and writings, Jeremiah expressed the deep emotional anguish he felt over his people's sins. Hence, he is often referred to as the weeping prophet. Jeremiah's father was Hilkiah, a priest. He started to prophesy during the 13th year of King Josiah's reign. He is highly regarded for his authorship of the books of Jeremiah and Lamentations. With the help of his scribe Baruch ben Neriah, Jeremiah wrote down the oracles, prophecies, and narratives. The book of Jeremiah opens with his calling by God. This is not a call to engage in mission work among the nations, but a directive to proclaim a message to Israel that will have implications for the future of other nations. 1 verse 10. Jeremiah expresses his reluctance, citing his youth, but God reassures him. I said to the Lord, behold, I am only a youth and do not know how to speak. But he said, I shouldn't say that, for to all to whom I send you, you shall go, and whatever I command you, you shall speak. 1 verses 6 to 7, in Jeremiah 16 verses 1 to 2, God tells him not to take a wife or have children in that place because of the impending judgment and disaster that would come upon the nation. God states that he knew us, before he formed us in our mother's wombs, he set us apart before we were born and appointed us as prophets to the nations. It underscores the idea of divine purpose and destiny for every person. Jeremiah's prophetic ministry took place before and during the Babylonian exile. Jeremiah prophesied about the imminent destruction of Jerusalem and the temple because of the people's unfaithfulness to God. He warned that Babylon would come to conquer the city. Jeremiah foretold the Babylonian exile, predicting that the people of Judah would be taken captive and live in Babylon for 70 years. He also foretold that after the exile, God would bring the people back to their land and establish a new covenant where God's law would be written on people's hearts, signifying a more personal and intimate relationship with God. Jeremiah was often viewed as a traitor for predicting the fall of Jerusalem and encouraging surrender to Babylon rather than fighting, which led to his imprisonment and attempts on his life. He often contended with false prophets who contradicted his message, claiming peace and safety when destruction was imminent. In the Temple Sermon, Jeremiah delivers a message from God to the people of Judah, criticizing them for relying on the physical presence of the temple in Jerusalem as a guarantee of their safety and God's favor, despite their rampant immorality and idolatry. He calls out the people for committing acts such as oppression, etc., while still coming to the temple to offer sacrifices and worship. Jeremiah's messages serve as a warning to the Israelites that their actions outside the temple are just as important as their religious rituals within it. He warned them that their sinful actions negate the security they think they have. He urges the people to amend their ways and turn away from their evil practices. True worship is not just about sacrifices or rituals, but about living according to God's commandments. Jeremiah highlights that God is present everywhere and cannot be confined to a building. The people must understand that their relationship with God requires moral integrity. In biblical contexts, a shepherd often symbolizes a leader or person in authority. Jeremiah criticizes the leaders of Israel for neglecting and exploiting their people. False shepherds are described as those who are self-serving, fail to care for the weak, and lead the people astray. God is presented as the ultimate shepherd who will gather and care for his people. Jeremiah proclaims that God will raise up a righteous branch, often interpreted as the coming Messiah, to lead his people in justice and righteousness. God is portrayed in the marriage metaphor as the husband who has been betrayed by his wife and consequently expresses all the anger and disappointment that follows betrayal. The narrative culminates with the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, fulfilling Jeremiah's prophecies. The concluding chapters address the aftermath of the exile, offering assurance of eventual restoration and God's continued faithfulness to his people. Jeremiah's message highlights the need for genuine repentance and a return to God to avoid judgment. Even in the darkest times, God offers hope and the promise of future restoration. God says in Jeremiah 29 verses 11 that his plan for us, that he knows his plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 12 verses 1 to 6. In this section, he questions God about the prosperity of the wicked and seeks understanding for his suffering. Jeremiah 20 verses 7 to 18. This is one of the most powerful confessions, where he doubts his role as a prophet, expressing bitterness and despair over his calling. These confessions highlight the human side of the prophet and illustrate the tension between his duty to deliver God's messages and his personal struggles. The Lamentations of Jeremiah reflects his grief and sorrow over the destruction of Jerusalem, which is personified as a grieving widow, and the suffering of the Israelites following the Babylonian conquest. Lamentations addresses the sins of the people and how these sins led to their downfall and suffering. Despite the despair, there are moments where Jeremiah expresses hope for God's mercy and steadfast love, asserting that it is possible for God to restore his people. We are encouraged to reflect on the relevance of Jeremiah's messages in contemporary society, particularly regarding faith, resilience, and the importance of standing up for truth in difficult times. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.